I dropped a Denture cleaning tablet into murky water and watched what happened through an underwater camera. Within 47 seconds, the first base appeared. By the 2-minute mark, I had 7 fish circling the same spot, all converging on a foam anchor point no larger than a quarter. This has nothing to do with bait. This is about dual sensory hijacking. The tablet I used costs 10 cents. It's designed to scrub plaque off false teeth while you sleep. But when you secure it above a bare hook with a rubber band and drop it into a lake, it triggers 2 separate neural pathways in predatory fish simultaneously, creating what biologists call a forced approach response. Let me explain the mechanics. The moment the tablet hits water, sodium bicarbonate begins reacting with citric acid. This creates a continuous stream of carbon dioxide bubbles, each one between 0.3 and 0.8 millimeters in diameter. These aren't random. They rise in a vertical column, and as they break the surface, they produce low-frequency vibrations between 10 and 200 hertz. That range is identical to the distress signal of a dying baitfish. Fish don't hear this the way we hear sound. They feel it through the lateral line, a sensory organ running along both sides of their body filled with neuromast cells. These cells detect pressure changes in water with terrifying precision. A bass can feel a mosquito larva twitching from 3 feet away. When a Denture tablet creates a vibration signature that matches prey in distress, the fish's brain interprets it as a feeding opportunity and initiates a motor response before visual confirmation. That's the first pathway. The second is chemical. Most Denture tablets contain menthol or peppermint oil as a flavoring agent. When dissolved, these compounds don't just disperse randomly. Menthol molecules are hydrophobic, meaning they don't fully integrate into water. Instead, they form microscopic lipid clusters that drift in suspension, carried by current. As these clusters pass over a fish's olfactory receptors, they activate the trigeminal nerve, the same nerve responsible for the cooling sensation you feel when you chew mint gum. In fish, trigeminal activation doesn't produce comfort. It produces alertness. The nervous system interprets the chemical irritant as a sign of environmental disturbance, which, when combined with the acoustic pressure from the bubbles, forces the fish into investigative mode. The brain receives 2 conflicting signals. Something is struggling, and something unusual is happening. The fish must resolve the contradiction by moving closer. I tested this in 3 separate locations over a span of 4 days. The first test was in a retention pond with moderate visibility, water temperature at 68 degrees Fahrenheit. I tied the tablet 6 inches above a size 2 circle hook using a small rubber band, then lowered it into 4 feet of water. I didn't cast. I didn't twitch the line. I let the chemistry do the work. At 34 seconds, I saw the first shadow. At 1 minute 12 seconds, I had a strike. The fish didn't nibble. It attacked the foam residue directly, inhaling the hook in the process. I pulled a 14-inch largemouth bass out of water that hadn't produced a single bite for the previous 90 minutes using a Texas-rigged worm. The second test was in a river with heavy current and stained water. Visibility was under 18 inches. I used the same setup but doubled the number of tablets, securing 2 of them in tandem. The current dispersed the bubbles faster, but the menthol concentration increased proportionally. Within 2 minutes, I had a smallmouth bass and a rock bass competing for the same zone. The smallmouth won. I landed it, reset the rig with a fresh tablet, and had another fish on within 90 seconds. The third test was the most revealing. I deployed the tablet in a farm pond that had been heavily fished the day before during a local tournament. The fish were pressured. They had seen every soft plastic, every crankbait, every topwater lure in circulation. I dropped the Denture tablet rig at dawn, when feeding activity is typically lowest due to overnight satiation. I recorded the event on a GoPro mounted to a PVC frame submerged next to the rig. The footage shows something I didn't expect. The fish didn't just approach and strike. They circled. 5 separate bass, ranging from 10 to 16 inches, formed a loose perimeter around the fizzing tablet. They didn't commit immediately. They studied it, and then, one by one, they darted in and made contact, not with aggression, but with investigative strikes, mouthing the area where the bubbles originated. This behavior aligns with research published in 2019 by the Journal of Experimental Biology, which documented how largemouth bass use a combination of mechanoreception and chemoreception to assess novel food sources in turbid environments. The study found that when visual input is limited, bass default to a taste-then-decide feeding strategy, using their buccal cavity to sample objects before full ingestion. The Denture tablet doesn't just attract them, it convinces them to taste. Now, compare this to what you're buying at tackle shops. A single package of scented soft plastics costs between $4 and $7. The scent is typically a garlic or anise oil blend suspended in a plastic polymer. The concentration is low because manufacturers are optimizing for shelf life, not sensory impact. The plastic itself is inert. It doesn't vibrate. It doesn't dissolve. It doesn't create a dynamic chemical plume. It sits in the water and waits for a fish to see it, smell it, and decide whether to bite. A Denture tablet costs 10 cents. It creates vibration, chemical dispersion, and visual foam residue simultaneously. It doesn't require a retrieve. It doesn't require depth adjustment. It works in stained water, clear water, moving water, and still water. And when the fizzing stops after roughly 4 to 6 minutes, you replace it with another tablet that costs 10 cents. The bass tournament industry operates on the assumption that fish are sophisticated enough to distinguish between natural prey and artificial lures, which justifies the existence of a $9 billion market for hyper-realistic baits with laser-etched gill plates and holographic finishes. But the neuroscience doesn't support that assumption. Fish don't think. They react, and their reactions are governed by sensory thresholds that can be triggered with bathroom products if you understand the biology. I'm not saying this will win you a tournament. Tournament bass are conditioned to avoid repetitive presentations, and if every competitor starts using fizzing tablets, the fish will learn to ignore them within a single event. But in unpressured water, or in scenarios where fish have been exposed to traditional lures for hours, the Denture tablet operates outside their learned avoidance framework. It's novel, it's disruptive, and it works. I caught 11 fish in 43 minutes using a single tablet replaced 3 times. The total cost was 40 cents. I didn't use a boat. I didn't use a fish finder. I didn't use a rod that costs more than a mortgage payment. I used a method that a biologist would recognize as sound, and an industry would prefer you never discover. The footage is unedited. The timestamps are visible. The fish are real.